how to get much more yield and incomes. And we are very privileged to have the presence of the leading research institute in Kenya, and I think global. They are going to introduce themselves, who are the first people actually to lead research work on nematodes in Kenya, specifically potato cyst nematode. Before we go into introduction, I just want to briefly run through the program. So we're going to start with opening remarks and some presentations from ISIPE and IITA team. And then after tea break, we are going to have 2 hours of practical work. So this is where we go to the stations that are positioned at the end of the tent, and they are going to guide us on how to see and appreciate various symptoms of nematodes, how do nematodes look like, and the impact on yields and crops. My expectation is that at the end of that session, all of us will be nematologists. I hope so. We will be nematologists. We'll go to farmers confidently, show them about nematodes, and of course, be available for them with all queries that they could have on nematodes. Of course, we can discuss follow-up actions after today. And then after lunch, we are going to release our friends, and we'll be left behind where internally we'll share the planning on how to go about the launch that is planned ahead. So please allow me to welcome Professor Danny Coyne to come in front and briefly introduce the team that he has. Kindly, Prof.
Thank you very much, Diana. A budding team of nematologists. We're going to finish the day with a room full of nematologists. Well, we look forward to that. They say that it's not always the voice that shouts loudest that gets heard. It's the voices that come together as a group, as teamwork, not necessarily the loudest. It's the ones that work as a team. And with nematology, we find that that really is the case. And one of the reasons, however, that we don't hear as much about nematology is because there's so few of us. So we have to come together for a convergent, simultaneous voice. Anyway, let me introduce the team. I'm Danny Coyne, as introduced by Diana, and we'll go through introductions of ourselves as well. But let me bring Solveig up. Solv, if you'd like to come up. So, and Kenan. So there's a team of 3 of us, and we've got this on the presentation as well, but while we've got the opportunity and the stage, let us introduce each other. So I'm Danny Coyne. I work for the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture. Solveig works for ISIPE, and Kenan works for IITA. But actually, although I'm stood here holding this today,
where's Nem Africa?
There you go. There you go.
There's Nem Africa.
My employer's emblem on my chest. The reality is that we stand together as one under the Nem Africa lab. So it really is truly a joint collaboration, interaction of nematologists from different organisations, and we stand as one team, hosted by ISIPE in the Nem Africa lab, actually. So we are the nematology lab here in Kenya. We work together, of course, with yourselves, Bayer, Syngenta, as well as other commercial groups, but also the universities, Calro, CAFIS. So we end, basically. So I'm Danny.
Yeah, morning, I'm Solveig. Yeah, I'm from ISIPE, you already said.
I'm Kanan Saikai, I'm from IITA. Yeah.
And then the other?
Us, who is going to give an opening remark and introduce his team.
Thanks, Diana. I think I need the microphone more than Danny. I might not be as loud as Danny, so I'll use the microphone. I think first is to welcome everybody, and first, so with our visitors, Danny, Solveig, and Kenan, and the whole team that is seated here from ISIPE and IITA. We are so grateful that you could find your time from your busy schedules to come and be with us here. I don't want to spend a lot of time speaking because the cup of tea tells you how happy we are that you're here. That's number one. From our side, we have teams from across the country. And I'm here to introduce these guys because they've traveled from all the potato growing areas in the country. Now, why potato? I think we all know and appreciate the fact that in terms of ranking of stable foods, we have corn or maize, and then we have potatoes, which is becoming more and more relevant into our days' lives. And I always take the example of Nairobi, where we have a population, almost 10% of the population in Kenya is here in the city. Talking about 4 million or 4.5 million out of 45 million, that means around 10% is here. Out of that, 60% are youngsters, and they do not touch maize. They do not eat githeri, they eat potatoes, either as crisps, chips, whatever, but they are interacting with potatoes more and more than with corn. And that means potatoes is becoming, as we have more youthful users, more youthful populations, potatoes will continue becoming more and more relevant. And it's for that reason that we think that the old system of growing potatoes, the way my mother did it, the way my grandmother did it, cannot be the same if we need to add more food onto the table and satisfy the demand for potatoes in the country. And for that reason, we have a team that is very specific, working with farmers in the field on behalf of Bayer on potatoes. We have I think the 5 potato towers in the country, which is Meru, we have Nyandarua, we have Narok, and we have Elgeyo Marakwet, the area around Elgeyo Marakwet. And for that, the teams that are here come from these regions. The team from the Meru Tower, just stand up. I'll mention your names from Meru. Oh, you are on. So Danny will never see you and notice you if he finds you in Meru. Maybe you can remove the mask briefly. Okay, thank you very much, Elias. Then we have Nyandarua. And Paul works with these 2 gentlemen here in Nyandarua, yes? Miriam, did you hear that? You didn't hear, you didn't? Sorry.
Ernest Gatobu, Nyandarua.
Okay, so that's the team from Nyandarua, and I think, I don't know whether it is by choice or chance that we are having more emphasis in Nyandarua. We have 3 guys versus 1 from Meru. Sorry, Elias. From Narok?
Patrick Kenywa, Narok.
Thank you very much. Team from Narok. Then from Molo, Nakuru, I would say Nakuru Molo area. That's the other tower I'd forgotten. I always put it together with Narok, but we have a team from Nakuru Molo area.
Nefat Njelo, Nakuru.
Martin Maina, Molo.
Molo, thank you very much. And last but not least, we have the team from the North Rift. Elgeyo Marakwet, Wasingishu. Yep.
Okay, my name is Cheruyot Victor from Wasingishu, Timboro area.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sharon Kemboi, covering Marakwet and Pokot South.
Good. So thanks very much, guys. So this is our team from the field, and they're interacting directly with the farmers, and they do quite some work in not selling products because, as I was telling Danny, if you look at the booklet you've been given, it is full of products, but we do not differentiate ourselves if we sell products. Instead, we try identifying what value we can add into farmers' lives with the solutions that we have that are described in that booklet. So these guys are busy working with farmers to try and add value to the farmers' farming experience. We also have guys who are not in the field, they are not commercial, they help us with technical matters. Kurendi.
Yes, my name is Faksat Kurendi. I'm in Big Solutions. So I handle registration trials, specifically in potato. That is why I'm here. So the work to get the product to the field starts right from here.
Yeah, so all products that are being registered in potatoes, we have a team that goes through trials to make sure that the product actually does what we want to propose to the farmers. Then we have from the go-to-market or marketing team, I think they are all ladies. In marketing is funny. All the ladies go to marketing. There they are.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Milka Njoroge. Karibuni sana, and we're glad that we are here as well to learn.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Isabella from marketing, and I'm happy to see you all.
Morning, everyone. My name is Sandra Murakaru, part of the marketing team. Thank you for coming, and of course, we look forward to learning much, much more from you.
Thank you very much. We will change, Danny, in future. We'll have more ladies in the potato towers and not seated in marketing. So we will see how that goes. But yeah, thank you very much. That is our team that is here. We have, you have seen what you have seen here is less than 20% of our team. We have such a big team out there in the field. And we just wanted to pick representative guys from the rest of the team. And we hope the message we carry from here can be disseminated to the rest of the team members who, of course, because of COVID, we could not be able to hold all of them here. And number two, we just needed to pick just a few who can be able to then be the ambassadors of nematodes to the rest of the team in the country. So without, did I introduce myself? I'm sure that's why you're lifting your hand. My name is John, and I lead the commercial team for Kenya. Yes? Yes, we do have virtual participants as well. We have, and that's why I said the team that is here is less than 20%. I'm sure there's almost another group of almost 20 who are virtually tuned into the meeting today. Yeah. So not to waste too much time, because it's not my, I mean, we finished my business. We also have the privilege of having our country commercial lead for East Africa, Bayer Crop Science. Okay, so he's in crop science, but also happens to have administrative duties. He's a managing director of Bayer East Africa, Mr. Loro Peria. Welcome, Loro. And a clap for me for introducing all these guys. Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, John. So yes, my name is Laurent. I'm the commercial lead crop science Eastern Africa, managing director. As you have properly said, and it was your question, you see there is a camera here, so we have, I hope, quite a bunch of colleagues joining, and not only maybe the other part of sales team, because we have made a bit of publicity of this event across East Africa organization, but even broader in Africa. What we are doing today, it's a very important event, at least for Bayer colleagues, that we want to move significantly our strategy through the smallholder farmer community. We have big ambition to develop our business and to support smallholder farmers all over the world. We have this sustainability objective worldwide to improve the livelihoods of 100 million smallholder farmer until 2030. Of course, Africa has to provide quite a number for obvious reason, and as well our region. And when we talk about potato, we know, like many other crop, the smallholder farmer are playing a key role, and that's why we really want to be able to provide a solution which fits as well, not only for large commercial farm, high technical farmers, but as well we strongly believe that new technology and innovation can be available and developed and pushed even at the smallholder farmer, or even mainly at smallholder farmers. And I think today, the launch of Velum, it's a good example of that. We strongly believe, it needs quite some effort, for sure, that what we are doing today is part of it, through our team, but as well all the partners we have. It can be research institute like you, but as well people working on the ground and to touch the number of farmers. As far as I know, in Kenya, we have more than 100,000 potato farmers, basically, 120. 800,000. Okay, sorry, I really minimize. So it's quite a lot of people to touch, to train, and especially when we are talking nematodes, you say you are not visible, but the nematodes, they are not visible neither. So we see the insect, we see the disease, we see the weeds, but the nematodes, nobody sees them. And this is maybe one of the problems we have. As long as nobody sees them, nobody suspects that they are the source of some damages. And that's why it's very important to learn how to recognize the damage which are done by the nematodes, what we are talking about, that we can, of course, transfer a minimum of this knowledge at the farmer level, and to help them to use some solution to solve the problem, which can be really critical on some crops, like mainly tomato, potato, and some other veggies. So very happy to have this event today. Looking forward for a nice program today. And of course, we are a private company, so for nice business result in the future. So thanks to all of you, and great welcome for all the colleagues who join online today. Thank you.
Roro. I also want to request our colleague to wave. I'm not sure you are introduced. Anthony Moshina. Anthony Moshina is in charge of export veg, and nematode problem is also in export vegetable. It's cutting across several crops. So looking forward to this interaction between research and of course, the commercial angle to see how we both come together, have synergies on the ground, and have impact, especially at the smallholder farmer level. I'm going to invite the presenters for the next session. So, Prof, back to you.
Thank you very much once again, Diana. Thank you, Laurent and John and everybody. And it really is our pleasure to be here today, as I said earlier, as we said, jointly. It shows great collaboration and partnership to hold hands with Bayer, as well as any other partner. And I'm glad John said, towards improving the livelihoods of smallholder farmers. Bayer obviously has the product Velum, which is a very good product, actually. And in fact, we're actually in discussions with your research team in Germany and North Carolina, the USA, to work together with Bayer, with Velum, or Fluparum, towards improving nematode management. But let me just say just now, on behalf of the whole team, we're not here to promote Velum. We're not here to focus on potato. We're here to work together with Bayer in promoting nematology awareness, nematode awareness, the issues surrounding nematodes, help us understand together the issues of nematodes and how to manage them, and manage them in an effective, efficient, and sustainable manner. And together we can do that. So that's why we're here, and we're very pleased to be here. So thank you very much for the invitation and for organizing this, Diana. It's great, and it's great to be here and great to be doing this together. So without greater delay, let's what we want to do today is this morning is just give you a snapshot view of nematodes, nematode problems, nematode damage, what they do, and how to manage them, basically, and just give you some information. You are not going to walk away today as nematologists, but you will hopefully walk away today with a lot more understanding and awareness of nematodes and nematode damage. Okay? So as we said earlier, we come from two research institutes, ISIPI, which is based just down the road, and which is where I work for IITA, and we're hosted by ISIPI. Solve's from ISIPI. Their headquarters are here in Nairobi. They work across Africa, and they've got stations in Ethiopia as well as Uganda, and I believe West Africa as well. So IITA is one of the international agricultural research centres, and it's the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture. Our headquarters are in Nigeria, but we've got stations pretty much all over Africa, certainly in each sector and various countries. About 15 countries we've got physical presence. And we've been established since 1967, ISIPI also since 1968, I believe. Anyway, we're about 50 years old. Yeah, theoretically, we should have done our jobs and moved on, but the reality is that agriculture is an ever-evolving science, and ever-evolving with problems and solutions required for them as we move along. So at NemAfrica, we come together under the NemAfrica, the Nematology Lab, based at ISIPI, involving different centres. Essentially, ISIPI and IITA but with lots of collaborations and interactions with other organizations. We are effectively probably the largest nematology group in the whole of Africa, and which is a big thing to say, but we really are. We're about 20, 30 people at any given time, nematologists, led by Solveig, Kanan, and myself at the moment, but with lots of interactions, lots of interns, lots of PhD students, master's students, and technicians. I think the last count we were about 25, 26, all working on nematodes and nematology. So we are the team. But we aren't the only team, and we work very closely with everybody who's willing to work with us, either in nematology or related. Right, okay, in Africa, we all know that the population is increasing rather rapidly. In Africa, more than any other place in the world, and in certain places, fantastically fast. Urbanizing. In order to feed that growing population, we need to intensify our cropping production systems. And in order to do that, intensification comes with it numerous challenges to production, in particular, plant health challenges. There will be greater importance of pests and diseases as we focus on certain crops and cropping systems. We need better IPM innovative approaches to deliver to farmers, and we need better ways to deliver those to farmers. So something like this today is absolutely perfect in achieving and addressing all those issues, basically, and working together. But of course, as we all know, there are certain areas of agriculture in Africa that are very intensified, the flower production systems in particular. They are intensified to the highest level, and with them comes a lot of pest and disease problems. Velum, I know the flower farmers like Velum very much because it's able to treat nematode problems in a way that it wasn't before. And a lot of the products, as you're all probably aware, were all removed from the market, so it's very encouraging for us as nematologists to see more environmentally sensitive and lower mammalian toxicity products coming onto the market that can address nematode problems. So, although we have some intensified systems, by and large, the vast majority of farmers are smallholder farmers, and we cannot ignore them. In fact, far from it, we actually have to focus on them rather than focusing on the big producers. This is where our production of food for those cities comes from. So, just for today, we've talked a little bit about nematodes, nematode problems. What is the issue with nematodes? A lot of people, and the vast majority of farmers that you will talk to, are not even aware of nematodes at all, let alone a problem. And so it is our job to raise that awareness, raise that understanding, raise that information, and get that information out to people so that they can reliably use that information to work on them and address them. But there is a lot of mystery, and part of that mystery is because there's so few nematologists in order to raise that awareness. And another part of the mystery is that they're underground, out of sight, not known, and the symptoms, by and large, of nematode problems and damage are either underground or very unspecific, and they could be anything. But they are very neglected. So today we wish to make you more aware of nematode problems, make you more able to make decisions about nematode problems, and more aware of how to manage them. Velum is one bullet in a whole magazine of how to treat nematodes, okay? But we want to just create some better knowledge for you today, but we won't be able to answer all your questions, that's for sure. And you probably will go away very much satisfied, but probably not completely satisfied. But anyway, we shall see. Right, okay, main focus today, plant parasitic nematodes, but we will address and give you a little bit of a flavor of some of the other nematodes that do exist and how to manage them. So what we want to do just now in my presentation is just give you some understanding of what nematodes are and possibly break the mold of what you think nematodes and nematode problems are. So the classic nematode is a worm-like... That is working? No, it doesn't work on there. Okay. So the classic nematode is a worm-like organism, basically. You've got your stylet at the head, which pierces the plant cells, whether it be roots or folia or stems, and it sucks the contents out of that cell, nourishes itself, and moves on to the next cell, damaging the cells as they go along, basically. And this is what they look like under the microscope, which hopefully you will see later on this morning. a whole mishmash, a swarm of nematodes all swirling around in a dish once you've extracted them from either plant roots or from the soil. The reality is they come in a whole range of sizes, shapes, and mannerisms. You might have a globule-shaped nematode, which is a cyst nematode, which you're probably all aware of now with potato cyst nematodes. This is actually on rice. That's a cyst nematode on rice. You've got large heads with a big, strong stylet. You've got others with a very long, slender stylet. You've got very slender style nematodes. You've got strange-shaped ones. You've got coiled ones, and you've got even a kidney-shaped one. So they come in a whole range of shapes and sizes. They are not just the worms that you maybe think you're aware of. And so we can categorize nematodes into any number of ways, but two key ways, or one key way, is in feeding types. And there's two main feeding types that we classify and categorize nematodes into. One is ectoparasites, which means that they feed from the outside of the root. So they don't enter the root, they feed from the soil. And this is a nematode head here on a rice root. That's the tip of a rice root. And you can see here this stylet penetrating the root from outside. So the soil environment is an area, a habitat for a whole range of plant parasitic nematodes. Okay? They feed from the outside and they cause, some don't cause that much damage, but others cause a huge amount of damage. And it obviously depends on how many there are as well. And here's a different type of nematode, again, an ectoparasitic, feeding on a root tip. The root tip is where most nematodes go for because that's the softest tissue. And that's where it's differentiating and soft and nice and juicy. And then we have endoparasites, endo inside the root. And here is I forget what root that is actually, but this is a parasitic, endoparasitic lesion nematode that you can see. This is stained red. Normally it's transparent. Stained red inside a root, and they enter the roots and they feed on the cells from inside the root. And by and large, they are the most damaging. And there's another one. You can see the eggs. They're also stained red inside that's a yam root from West Africa. Then within endoparasites, we've got two types. We've got the migratory, the ones that move, and they move up and down the roots, and they feed as they move along the roots, damaging the roots. And then you've got sedentary. We've all heard of root knot nematodes, I presume. If you're selling Velum, you've definitely heard of root knot nematode. These are root knot nematodes and cyst nematodes. Now the nematodes, this is a tomato root tip under a microscope. The nematodes have been stained red. They enter the root at the root tip, and then they migrate to a feeding site. Here's a whole load more under the microscope. They go to a feeding site, and they find half a dozen cells, and they feed on those cells for the rest of its 1 month life cycle. And it swells. It's unable to move. And it swells into a football-shaped, a spherical, perhaps 0.5 millimeter long, and you can see it on the poster over there. Perhaps 0.5 millimeter long, it swells. When you get lots of them, you get lots of swelling, and they cause the deformation of the roots that we will see later, but that you can see on the posters, causing root knots and galls on the roots, which is why they're called root knot nematodes. So there's ectoparasites and there's endoparasites. Endo inside the root, ecto outside in the soil. Endoparasites are migratory and sedentary. So they either stay put or they move up and down in the roots. And it's important to understand that biology of nematodes when you're working out how to manage them. So I want to focus on root knot nematodes because if there's one group of nematodes that if I was asked what I had to focus on, if I had to focus on one topic as nematology, it would be root knot nematodes. Because of the way they live, because of the damage they cause, and in particular because of the vast range of hosts that they're able to infect, makes them incredible pests and damage agents to crop production. And if I had to say what the biggest biotic threat to agricultural production in the tropics would be, it's root knot nematodes. It's not bacterial wilt, it's not locusts, it is root knot nematodes. But we don't see the damage that often, but they affect every single crop that we grow, and they cause significant major damage on a vast number of those crops. But it poses difficulties for rotation, for example, because you rotate with another crop, and that still gets hammered by the root knot nematodes. And they're getting worse, and they're getting worse. So having a product like Velum on the market makes a big difference to being able to manage them. So some of the symptoms of root knot nematodes. Here, when you've got a root crop and you unearth the product of that crop, you see the damage. But by and large, they affect the roots and they stay underground and the farmer does not see that damage. But they definitely see the damage when you've got something like this. This is yam, beetroot and turnip or parsnip. And that's deformed. It is actually a good yield. It's a reasonable yield, but it's completely useless and it's completely unmarketable. Carrots, of course, and this is an extreme example of damage to carrots from Nigeria. But as you can see, you do get some yield, but the farmer doesn't experience that until he goes to harvest, he or she. Don't know what that is. Oh, there we go. Coming up. Celery roots, massively galled, massively damaged, and what happens is that they're now prone to root diseases as well, whether it be bacterial or fungal, but that level of damage to that physiology of the roots means that it is not efficient, it is not able to access water, it is not able to access nutrients, and so it's an inefficient root system. And what often happens, of course, is that farmers continue to water and put fertilizer on these crops because they see the above ground growth and foliage and think they're doing okay, but they actually need some better inspiration through fertilizers and water. But it's all often a waste. Taking a little bit of time to show up. Yeah, okay. Cowpea, and I'm just going to whiz through a few here. This is soybean. Any guesses for this? And if you get it right, I'll give you an IITA cap. Any guesses for that? Common crop in Africa. Come on, some of them you must have a guess. Sorry? Maize, not maize, that is cassava. And I've put that up, that's actually from Nigeria as well. And again, it's a major example, an example of a major damage. But I ask you why, because cassava it's pretty much renowned as being the most resilient crop to everything. And most plant protection people you will ask, they say, nematodes do not affect cassava. Well, it's completely wrong, and they cause actually major damage, especially to susceptible varieties. And that's cassava as well. Okay, lettuce, banana roots. There's a picture of this on one of the posters. This is guava. This is guava from Brazil. And I'll come back to this actually. That's another one. And what fascinates me about this is this is a fully grown tree with tree roots that become infected, and you've got total woody roots that are still affected in the same way that tomato and other crops are affected, vegetable crops are affected. But it's able to cause the same level of damage on a full-grown tree as it is on a tomato plant. This is guava. Now we're just going to move to some of the symptoms above ground. This is a guava leaf from the tree that you've just seen the roots from. And as you can see, it doesn't look that bad, but when we talked to the farmer, I said, how do you know that tree's affected? And he said, if you look around the edges, you can see the yellow chlorosis. He knew that that tree was affected and that if we dug there, we would get some samples. Now this is a different orchard, and that is the symptoms of root knot nematode on guava in a major commercial production system in Brazil. Okay, and I saw this, and this was next door to a field that looked like that. And I said, have you had a fire? And he said, no. That is the problem with root knot nematode that obviously came in the infected within seedlings that were infected at the same time across the field, so they're equally, uniformly infected, and it looks like they've been burnt. The twist here is that this is a combination with fusarium wilt, so it's not just the nematode. And together with fusarium wilt, it's devastating on certain crops and certain combinations of diseases and nematodes. And this fusarium root knot nematode combination is absolutely devastating for the guava industry in Brazil. Right, somebody must know what this is. Coffee, thank you. And that's what coffee roots look like when you've got damage by root knot nematode. And if you look closely, you can see little bead-like galls, which is different to what we've seen earlier. Small bead-like galls, but the problem is, and here they've gone necrotic, okay? And here all the roots are starting become necrotic, inefficient, they're not active, they're not working, they're not uptaking water or nutrients. Right, this is maize, and that is a maize root. No galling at all. These are female nematodes. You've got 3 female nematodes here, stuck on the side of the root, no galling. Some maize varieties will react by galling, but often, and most gramineous crops tend to have very limited galling, but you may have very large populations of root knot nematode that cause massive damage, but they don't always see it. My friend and colleague in South Africa, who actually took this photo, he said, this photo here, he said, the vast proportion of the damage in that field, it's not fertilizer, it's not poor germination, it's root knot nematode, completely infested with root knot nematode in South Africa. This is rice. Again, a different style of damage. Small hook-like tips to the roots, but causes big damage on rice. And this is wheat from Europe. Again, small bead-like galling. Chilies. I won't ask you what that is because I know that you know. Chilies. And that plant there, that's actually in Thailand, a plant. Nematodes rarely kill plants. Very, very rarely do they kill them. They suppress them, they reduce them, they're chlorotic, they're stunted, etc., etc., but rarely do they kill them. This is one example, and it could have been an interaction with a disease as well, which is often what does kill the plant in the end. And that is what the root looked like from that chili plant, completely damaged beyond anything that works, basically. Back to the flower industry, and this is roses from Ethiopia. And this is just a picture of, it doesn't work in here, a picture of infected roses in one greenhouse, and then in the next greenhouse where it's not infected. And that's planted into soil. And I had another picture as well showing how a lot of flower farms are using, what do you call it, soilless media. Hydroponics, thank you. Hydroponics. And they think they're immune from nematodes, but the nematodes come in through the irrigation system. And it only needs one. One produces 400, 400 produce 400 each. And within a very short space of time, within a year, you can have a major infestation within your, especially where you've got hydroponics, where you're recycling the water and distributing it across your whole farm. And we're not just restricted to crops as well. This is in Thailand, and when I was visiting my colleague at the university in Thailand, he was asked to go and check a golf course. In South Africa, a big business for football fields, all turfs basically, football fields, golf courses. People who play golf, does anybody play golf? Solvig does, I know. I don't play golf. One reason I don't play golf is I can't afford it. It costs too much, okay? But places like Thailand and Scotland, where I come from, golf is a major industry and it's a major earner of forex. You get people flying from all over the world to come and play golf, and when they play golf, they don't want a golf green that's patched with yellow patches. They want a nice, green, lush-looking golf course. So it's bad for business, for nematodes on golf courses. And in the States, they spend huge amounts of money on golf courses. And yeah, I've just highlighted that it's actually this was actually the wet season, so it's difficult to see, especially on this screen. But you can see yellow patches. In the dry season, I was informed that it really is a patchwork quilt of yellow and green. And that's under the that's the turf roots under the microscope, as you can see from the yellow patches that we were. And as you can see, the roots are just completely necrotic and diseased and useless. And again. Right, I wanted to focus on root knot nematodes just to say that they are not just a single entity, but they're a group of nematodes, different species. There's about 100 species, but there's about 4 or 5 that are main species, but they affect every single crop that we grow, and they cause massive damage. So if we had to focus on anything, root knot is the one to focus on. But there are a lot more different types and species and forms of nematodes. Lesion nematodes is one of them. And root knot nematodes are endoparasitic and they're sedentary. Lesion nematodes are endoparasitic and they're probably the second most important group. And these guys, as you saw earlier, they enter this is a rice root, and as you can see, inside this rice root, it's just full of nematodes. That's not an efficient working route. And what happens is that you see this, and you think, oh, the rice field's been flooded, and it's not working properly. We need to sort out the irrigation. There's nothing to do with irrigation. It's nematodes reducing the root system, which reduces the crop's ability to actually perform. And so you get these sort of watery patches where you've got heavy densities of nematodes, which of course reduces the yield. The flower industry, the farmer of this anthurium farm in Thailand had this damage to his anthuriums. And whilst he could still sell his flowers, his market was exporting the whole plants to Europe, and he was banned from doing so because he was infected with lesion nematodes. So even though he's got a reasonable looking plantation, he's stumped. He can't do anything with them. Bananas, we might all be aware of this. Anybody from Kisi? Yes, right. You know all about this. And Meru, perhaps. Bananas, they fall over. Damn, that was a strong storm last night. That knocked all our bananas down. We need to prop them up because them strong winds are devastating. Nothing to do with the wind. Well, it is. The wind helps, of course. But it's actually the root anchorage to the banana plant that's the problem. Nematodes have destroyed the root system. The plant is unable to be anchored properly. You get a nice big heavy bunch on top of it, and bang, over it goes at the slightest wind. Okay? Causing major amounts of damage. Lesion nematodes are the main cause of this. Destroying the root system, becoming necrotic, unable to, they die, they wither, they're not anchoring the plant. And then another form, back to flower markets, is, if you ask somebody, I'd say, yeah, you've got lots of nice flowers there. What's the problem there? The problem is that farmer wants to harvest everything in one go with nice big flower heads. Nematodes, they reduce the size of the flower head, so the quality of the product, but they also end up being erratically. They occur erratically in a farm, generally, and so you get patches. So you can't harvest that in one go, which is what the farmer wants to do, to be efficient. So it's probably costing more money to harvest that than it would be to actually just destroy it and save his money, or her money. Reniform nematodes. This is another sedentary, semi-endoparasitic nematode, which looks like this, which is why it's called the reniform nematode. Called Rotilenculus reniformis, but don't worry about the Latin names. And this is what it looks like, and it's a beautiful nematode. I just love the shape of this, but it's got a very ugly outcome, and this is just one symptom of the damage that it causes. It's actually a big problem on vegetables, and if you ask a sweet potato farmer, has anybody ever seen this? This is sweet potato. Yeah. You ask the farmer what the problem is there, he'll say, it didn't rain at the right time, and so it's all cracked. Well, water and rain and access to water is part of the issue, but nematodes are the primary cause of that damage, this particular nematode. Then we have cyst nematodes. I can see all your ears prick up now. And yes, this is PCN, which unfortunately Kenya now has in just about every single potato field. We did a survey a few years ago when it was first detected. And in that survey of 1,400 farms, potato farms, we detected it positively in 82% of those farms, which means pretty much it's in every single farm, potato farm that we sampled. This is what it looks like when you've got a really heavy infestation. But of course, when you or the farmer pulls the potato plant out of the ground, it's a bit like the maize really, you pull it out, the roots are stripped from everything that's hanging on the sides as it comes out the soil, and you don't see the cysts, and you don't see the root knot nematodes, and you think, oh, it's okay, but it's not okay. And that is a potato field. It's actually in South America. And we went to that farm for a particular reason. Does anybody think that's a good field? It's a loaded question. It looks like a good field. To me, that looks like a very good potato field, but we've taken that field because it had a very, very high infestation of PCN. And what sometimes happens, not always, but sometimes, what do we harvest? Why do we grow potatoes? For what? For potatoes. Where do they grow? Underground. Okay? So what we want from that is not all the leaf, but the tubers. And sometimes the physiological interactions between pests and hosts means that the host redirects its nutrients. And what happens here is you get a lot of foliage, but underground you get zero. So it actually looks like a good crop. And when under serious damage, then everything falls apart, of course. Cyst nematodes on rice. You've got a heavily infected and a fairly clean plant side by side. Same with cabbage, different species of nematode, but all cyst nematodes. Carrots, big problem on carrots in Europe, cyst nematodes. And then we've got foliar nematodes, which some of you are probably never even aware of, but they can be quite devastating. This is wheat affected by the cockle ear nematode, and it distorts the foliar part of the crop, and they infect the grains, so there's no grain in there. These are just filled full of nematodes. A major problem, relatively easily controlled by various reasons, and so it's not a major problem now, certainly in Europe where it used to be, but you still do find it across the world. Foliar nematodes on rice, they cause distortions to the leaves, which interferes with photosynthesis and grain formation, and then and also discoloration, which again affects the ability to photosynthesize. This is NSAID. Has anybody ever heard of NSAID? NSAID, anybody? You've all seen it. I know you've all seen it. This is what it looks like when it's infected with this foliar nematode. This is what it should look like, and this is what it looks like in the ground. Have you all seen it? Yeah. You get them as an ornamental plant in gardens and things, but in Ethiopia, NSAID is a major form, a staple crop. It's an orphan crop, but in the south and southwest of Ethiopia, there's about 20 million people depend on it as a staple crop. It's only grown in Ethiopia, but it's particularly prone to nematodes, mainly the root ones. Strawberry, foliar nematodes, big problem in Europe, and I'm not so sure here. I've not really worked on strawberry, but I would suspect so. They distort the leaves, reduce photosynthesis, cause distortions, and they affect yield. And then stem nematodes, particularly for the flower market and bulb market, they end up causing a lot of damage through restrictions in movement, basically, because a lot of them are quarantine pests. Cause a lot of rotting to the bulbs, but they also cause distortions to the flower heads, which is what the farmer wants. And also potatoes. I'm not entirely sure whether it is here in Africa, but this stem nematode is a major problem in Europe, causing a lot of rots, especially in storage. So the importance, so that's symptoms. We wanted to whiz through symptoms of different types of nematode to give you an understanding that there isn't just one type of nematode that causes damage to tomato roots. There is a whole range of nematodes, some of which are incredibly important in certain circumstances on certain crops, and others, like root knot nematode, that are important across them. So how are they important? Apart from just causing damage to the roots, of course, heavily toxic chemicals in the past. I'm trying to think of the name. So long since I've used them, I'm forgetting the name. It's, sorry? Phenamifos is the one I was thinking of, yes. And carbofuran. And carbofuran, they're all banned now. Methyl bromide. Yeah, they're all banned and we don't have anything. So as I said earlier, it is good that we've got better, more sustainable products coming onto the market. But there is a side effect with the contamination. And it all costs money as well, of course. Losses. Where you've got a root crop, you get major losses to the actual product. We've seen the bananas, lost yields, lost to efficient harvesting potential. And then on potatoes, we're back to root knot nematode here. This is in South Africa. Root knot nematodes are a major problem on potatoes across the globe. Okay, you get a yield, although it suppresses the yield, you get a yield, but it causes distortions to the tuber. Major impact when you're peeling it. It means that you've got to peel X% more of the tuber in order to have the flesh. It also causes major problems when, who was it saying earlier? All the youngsters are now eating potato either in crisp form or in chip form. The fast food industry does not want root knot nematode infected potatoes because they look ugly. So there's a massive rejection. And there was a nice graph which I took out which showed in South Africa the greatest amount of rejections at market was due to root knot nematodes. Right, back to coffee. Do we all drink coffee? Okay, we're all proud of our coffee existence here in Kenya. Well, I am. I'm the biggest coffee drinker out, I tell you. I love my coffee. So in coffee, who is the #1 producer of coffee in Africa, do you think? Kenya. You think Kenya? Any advance on Kenya? Ethiopia by a long shot, okay? Second then. Second producer in Africa? Rwanda, Uganda. Third? Côte d'Ivoire, but Robusta. Fourth is Tanzania, and fifth is Kenya. So we're not up there at the top. But the issue is, the global consumption of coffee is going up. The globe wants more and more coffee every day. The global production is also going up, but in Africa, production's gone down. And in Kenya, it's half of what it was 20, 30 years ago. Now, okay, there's a lot of houses being planted on some of the coffee plantations, which doesn't help, but the coffee plantations that are there, they look like this. And I can prove that because that is from a coffee field here in Kenya, as is that, okay, and that's from a farm that we're working on at the moment that Kenan and Celestine are doing a lot of work on. The farmer I was talking to, he was unearthing some of his old coffee, less productive coffee areas, and that is what the root system looks like. I don't know if you can see that from the back properly, but that ball, and this is a picture from the farmer, not from myself, which is why it's not quite so good. Okay, that ball of root is all knotted, gnarled, twisted, woody, and not functional. And that's, to me, that is one of the major reasons why coffee is not producing as well as it could be or should be. But in Africa, we've got no idea of what is happening with nematodes on coffee. We've got no nematologists working on it, apart from Kenan and Celestine. The Coffee Research Institute doesn't have a nematologist, doesn't have any idea. And we're not really sure about what species are present, and there's certainly no activity to manage them. Brazil, my colleague in Brazil, is a coffee nematologist working for the national program. She has a team of about 20 people, and they only work on coffee, because coffee is viewed as being a major product of Brazil, as we all know, okay? They have kits developed for rapid diagnosis. They even have laws in place that they have to be that the nurseries have to be certified free of nematodes in order to sell them, or they're taken down, purely and simply because of root knot nematode on coffee. And then, of course, back home, deadly pest threatened. That was front page of the Daily Nation a couple of years ago when we started working on PCN. And another impact of nematodes, that is a potato field in the front. And can you see what's in the back? A forest, natural, indigenous, primary forest. Last year, I took this picture. The year before, this potato field looked the same as that. And you can see the remnants of the forest, basically. If your potato fields, or the farmer's potato fields, are not producing potatoes as much as you would like them, then we need to open up some more land in order to plant our potatoes, in order to grow a nice crop, at the expense of the forest. That's actually near Moshi in Tanzania, actually. But that is Kinangot. That's heading up into the Aberdares, where you've got nice natural forest, in order to plant potatoes. That is purely to plant potatoes. Okay, very quickly, diagnostics. I am not going to go through diagnostics of nematodes and taxonomy. What I want to say is, if we have healthy planting material, it may make all the difference, and it doesn't matter which nematode you have. Healthy planting material as opposed to infected seedlings from the nursery or infected tomato seedlings from the farmer's small nursery. Healthy planting material doesn't matter. You don't need to know which nematodes you've got, okay? It's the first line of defense. Resistance is another, where we do need to know what nematodes we have. Okay, we all know that this is tomato. I'll tell you, so you don't have to guess, that it's a screen house in Ethiopia for export production. Would you agree with me that that is a really nice looking crop of tomatoes? Nobody agrees, or we all agree. Does everybody agree? This is a participatory audience, or supposed to be. Okay? We were doing an awareness training actually for nematodes at Hawassa Research Station, and this is in Hawassa down the Rift Valley in Ethiopia, and we got access to go and visit the tomato farm. We went to the farm, the manager said, there's the farm, sample wherever you want, however much you want, whenever you want. And I said, well, we don't want to disturb your plants. He said, doesn't matter, we're turning them out the next day. The next day, this was the whole greenhouse was leveled and removed because they are not economically producing. They were inefficient. They dropped below the threshold level, and so they were all removed. The following day, true story. Why? Because they were all infected with root knot nematode. However, the manager said to me, he said, these plants were expensive hybrid tomato, forget that, expensive hybrid tomato imported from the Netherlands and grafted onto nematode-resistant rootstock. He said, so why have I got a nematode problem? And I said, the reason is the nematode in the Netherlands that this is resistant to is a different species to the one that you've got here in your greenhouse, and it's not resistant to that, so it's useless. So all that money spent on expensive hybrid seed, grafting onto rootstock, resistant rootstocks, and then planting out, all not entirely wasted, but pretty much wasted. So he was an unhappy manager. Okay? So diagnostics of which species is which is sometimes incredibly critical. And that's what the roots look like in that greenhouse. Okay. Very quickly, we need to improve our cropping production systems. And whether it be smallholders, doing small vegetable production, or even smallholders producing coffee, sugarcane, big crops. Big commercial crops actually are also produced by smallholders, and they all work into that system. Whether it be potatoes or flowers, we need to be able to manage our nematode problem much more efficiently than we are doing currently. And to do that, we need days like this where we can help to increase awareness, understanding, and how to go about it. But do remember, it's not always what you can see that is important. Sometimes it's what you can't see. And that is so true with nematodes. Okay? With that, I'd like to thank you very much. I hope I didn't drag that on too long. Solvi's going to take over now and go through some management options, potential management options, other than Velum, but including Velum. Okay, so I think what we'll do, we'll hold questions to the end. Once all three of us are going to give a presentation, and I suggest holding questions to the end. Okay. But you're the chair, so yes. Okay, right. Yeah. Yes. Is there a question from any questions?
Do we have an idea of quantification of the loss, for example, in Africa or a given country due to nematodes in value?
The exact answer, no, we do not. We can only speculate and elicit data from what we know. Smallholder farming systems is incredibly difficult to speculate and calculate. The global figure is something like, what was it, 180 billion? We're into hundreds of billions of dollars globally. But to be honest, I believe that we're massively underestimating the losses. The losses come in a whole variety of dimensions as well, like root crops. You got a decent yield, but actually it's not marketable. And then disease interactions. So you've got a loss from fusarium wilt and bacterial wilt, but actually that wouldn't have occurred if you did not have nematodes. We can prove that with a nematode-resistant variety, it's not prone to bacterial wilt or fusarium wilt, or you've got 5% as opposed to 80% loss. So there's all sorts of machinations basically that build up. We're talking hundreds of billions, basically. And then you've got the importance that we're talking about in terms of contamination with pesticides and additional labor and you talk to the flower farmers, when they've got a nematode problem, they have to take it out of production. So they're not producing. So it's not a case of percentage loss with and without nematodes. They have to take it out for 3 months to treat it and then put it back into the rotation system. So it's got major implications across the board. But huge amounts, and whatever figure you see, it's a massive underrepresentation. And getting worse. The more we intensify the system, we're seeing, like yam, for example, in West Africa. West Africa, yam is a majorly important crop. If a Nigerian has not eaten yam, he has not eaten. Full stop. So it is incredibly important. And when I started working in Nigeria 20 years ago, root knot nematode was not a problem on yam. You know, it was there, and it was, you know, you see a little bit here and a little bit there. Major problem was something else. Now, root knot nematode on yam, where we're seeing more intensive production systems and more repeated cropping of yam on the same land, root knot nematode is a major problem. And we had a farmer in Abuja, and his whole field, he said, all wasted. All of it, like 4 or 5 acres, completely wasted because it was all completely gnarled and knotted and just not animal feed only.
One before you sit, Danny. I mean, you've seen nematodes in a whole host of crops. Is the economic damage of nematodes on the crops different on different crops? Are there crops that are more damaged in terms of production by nematodes than others? I'm saying this because we've seen a scary photo of wheat, okay? And if you talk to a lot of wheat farmers, they will reckon, yes, we have nematode problem, but the cost benefit of treating for nematodes in wheat might not be as same as maybe in potatoes or in carrots. Would you rank crops, on what some crops getting more damaged in terms of yield than others?
Yeah, it's difficult to say really, but yeah, there's certain crops that are really prone. Tomato, for example, you know, it's the number one. You know, if you're working on tomato, you have to work with nematodes and nematode issues, basically. But there's crops like wheat that are less obvious, actually. And there's a wonderful photo from Europe. It's an infrared image of 2 wheat fields, one that's resistant to cereal cyst nematode and one that's susceptible. And the infrared image shows the 2 fields, and it lights up like a Belisha beacon on the right, on the susceptible field, because it's reflecting weeds. Now this is another example of the interaction. Because the wheat is being suppressed, the weed population is massive, and it's outcompeting the wheat. So the farmer is having to spend much more on herbicides, weed management, but also at the same time taking a hit on yield of wheat from the nematodes in addition to the weed population. So it's difficult really. And of course every crop has got different varieties, so we can't categorize a single crop very often. You know, I'm talking tomato, but there's actually some very good resistant varieties that can really manage nematode problems well, which we always need to remember. It's a bit dangerous to start categorizing crops. But one of the issues is there's just too little research input into looking for resistance to nematodes. It's ignored, it's overlooked, it's not taken seriously. But we have to take it seriously. Yeah.
Last question.
Last question. Going. No, blinded by the science.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
It's falling apart. Oh. All right. Which one?
You can hit the buttons, but if you go, left, right.
All right, might hit the buttons. Oh. Sneakily. I might hit the buttons. Okay. Thank you, Danny. Well, so I hope you all know about how important nematodes are. I'm going to talk about the difficult part, I think. The management, not easy. And again, I'm really excited to be here. Sorry, I introduced myself very quickly, but I'm really looking forward to interacting later, especially in the practical part. And also with management, I'm thinking that with your work, I don't know, on parallel, we might, I'm going to present some options and a few examples, but maybe in the future, I'm just thinking, I'm looking at Diana, that parallel, we might actually be doing some research together, trials, in terms of management of nematodes, because there is lacking, and more really has to be done. So I'm hoping that's one of the outcomes in future. Anyway, yeah, quite excited to be here. So let's just go through, hopefully not too superficially, just to point out these are some of the management options that are out there that I'll touch in on. So I'll be going through some of those. Before I go to that, let's just remind ourselves again about nematodes, just to put it in perspective. So nematodes, Kanan will say, are everywhere. And it's maybe just, as I said, to put in perspective, so there's no pointer, sorry, that most of the nematodes are actually in marine, in the sea, and in fresh water, most nematodes actually. And then you've got the soil nematodes. And only about 10% actually of the proportion are plant parasitic. That's putting it in perspective. Then, what's this one again? Do you remember? What did Danny say this is? This is that plant parasitic, right? But we also have other groups of nematodes in the soil that are feed on bacteria. They're actually beneficial in the cycling of nutrients. We have ones that feed on fungi. Ones that feed on other nematodes, and then the plant parasitics. So one of the points of showing this slide too is that if you are a nematologist, this is quite difficult, because when you do take a soil sample and you get your nematodes, you have to know what's what, and that's the difficult part of being a nematologist, to be honest, and a very important part, as they'll tell you later. Okay. And why? I think Danny's really said very well why it's important. So plant parasitic nematodes do cause damage, and I think I'll just move on. We talked about bananas, so they are important to be aware of, so that they don't cause damage and yield loss. Symptoms, he's also mentioned. Root knot is probably one of the nematodes that you can actually demonstrate to farmers. If you pick up the root properly, you can demonstrate to farmers that this is a root knot nematode. There is a little danger though. Sometimes I've found that sometimes farmers, maybe you've been aware as well, can mistake root knot nematodes for the noduling, like peas and things. So that can be sometimes confused with root knot. So that's just to be aware of. But of course, nodules, they fall off. Anyway, that's happened sometimes that we confuse that. Okay, so now how do you find out if you got a nematode problem? So do I have a nematode problem? This is probably obvious, but not to all maybe, is get your farm tested. And that's, I guess, where you guys are involved, to find out if it is plant parasitic nematode free, which is highly unlikely, but you might have more or less. There's always nematodes there, but it's to find out what is your, what is the seriousness of your nematode problem if you've got one. So we'll talk a little bit about sampling. It's very important, and I think this is very important for you. Sampling is extremely important, and we'll talk about it later. We've got our tools we talk about. It's how you sample. So, and also we've got this. Now, Danny, I don't know. We have this book here, which is it's a manual. Have you seen it? Have any of you come across this? It's a manual. Anyway, it's all about nematodes, a practical guide to sampling, and extracting and so on. I think, I'm not sure if you're going to get one, or anyway, but this is kind of a Bible, really. It's got DuPont. Yeah, we want to buy in the future. Anyway, this is you can have a look at it later. So a lot of what I'm saying here will be said more there, actually. Anyway, sampling very important. And then you have to think a bit like a nematode. They're everywhere, but they're not everywhere equally in the soil. So you have to think, okay, then I have to go to sample many places in a field to make sure you capture the nematodes that are there. And then you have to think, okay, there's plants, so let me sample the root zone, those sort of things you have to think about. So you have to really know about your nematodes. Another thing, when you take samples, labeling, make sure you label where you sample, so that you know where the sample came from. Quantity, we can talk about, but often we're talking a liter of soil as a one composite sample. I'll get back to that. Depth, we're talking root zone in general. And then storage is very important to nematodes are soil-borne. They don't like heat. They will die if you put a sample in the sun for a while. They will die. So you have to be very. These are live animals, so you have to put them in the shade. Those sort of things you have to think about. This is just some examples of sampling. This is, for example, a potato field. You might sample in a zigzag. It's all in the book. But let's say you want to look for nematodes in an African bush. You might want to take different bushes as the replicates, to represent the area. Or under a tree. You may take different tree. Here we're doing under the canopy of a tree in the root zone. And you might end up with a lot of soil. So you'll need a big car and a strong man. But in general, you end up with quite a lot of soil samples if you're doing a survey. But also root samples, which I haven't mentioned. So sampling is soil and roots in the field. But we'll talk more. I think our practical session will interact more on all this. Then, so sample processing is something that us nematologists do, or crop nuts, or other, but we'll go through it anyway. So you have, for example, a soil sample, a root sample. You want to get those nematodes out of the roots and out of the soil. So there are ways that people have come about how to do that. So you chop up and you take a proportion, and we use a sieve and water. So the nematodes, they wriggle through a tissue into water that then you can extract, concentrate, and identify and quantify. We'll demonstrate all that today. Then what next? Well, that's the bit what Daniel was, the diagnostics is very important. And this is where actually the expertise, I think, of a nematologist comes in usually. We have the morphology, so how the nematodes look like, and luckily some nematodes have specific characters, so it's easier than others, but more and more we're using molecular methods which really help us species, and we are doing that at ICIPA ITA to a certain extent, but we also have international partners that help us. So that's something we're actually developing and improving on, the molecular identification of nematodes. Even actually, speaking of that, we are looking for tools where you can actually go to the farm, take a sample, and on the spot detect certain important nematodes. Like that's the way ahead, no? To have a kit where, because I think for the farmers, to send samples to crop nuts, it might be a bit expensive, so I think future, if you could get kits that at least would detect the most important nematodes, that's really the way forward. Oh, so now management, which I was trying to avoid. So basically management, of course, is reducing that with pest you're reducing your infestation to below the injurious level. And you have to use different methods, has to be sustainable, and has to be environmentally friendly. So I'm just going to touch in on, the basic principles are you can either kill them directly, which brings us usually to the chemical control. You can starve them, that could be a resistant variety. And you could inhibit reproduction, which is also actually could be a resistant variety or a trap crop. So I think you know all about IPM, but the point of IPM, is to use different strategies to control your pests. There's no ever any silver bullet. So let's take first prevention. As Danny also mentioned, clean seedling material is really quite one of the best, I think, if you can have clean seed, that's the best way forward to avoid nematode infestation. These are banana, for example, and we have James over there who works a lot with bananas and tissue culture plants, which are clean, that can then be used for, and also for clean seed material as well as potatoes these days. You have tissue culture plants, but you can also actually treat, for example, flower bulbs with hot water. And also banana cuttings, you can treat with hot water to clean them from nematodes before you plant. I won't go in detail because I'd like James later to talk to you about that, okay? Then I just thought I'd put in a slide here because especially cysts, it's, they are tiny and they move with tools, agricultural tools, boots between sites. So it's you have to be aware of that. You can spread nematodes even when you go in the field. And then another one I haven't put here is runoff of water. Flooding can also move nematodes around, so it's good to be aware of that. Regulatory quarantine, that's more like I would consider as a border control, almost like PCN is a quarantine pest, but we already have it. So quarantine is like preventing the pest coming into the country often, where you have then regulations. Eradication is probably impossible with nematodes once they're in. I would say that, yeah, they are. I don't think I know of any. I think Australia thought they had eradicated a PCN infestation when it came in, but I've heard that actually it has spread, and so they were not able. So for nematodes, I don't think I can think of an example where they have managed to eradicate nematodes. Then something about physical management. So I mentioned about the heat. The nematodes don't like heat. So steaming is one thing that could be used to control nematodes. Of course, it kills everything else as well, so you have to consider. But in the flower industry, I know they use it for potting material or planting material. You steam sterilize basically your soil or your planting media, so it could be useful. But it's fairly easy to apply, but it could be a bit expensive because of the steam that you have to produce. So I'm just mentioning it. I'm also going to quickly go. I mean, solarization is not something that is often used, but it is a possibility, again, catching heat. But there's all that plastic. I'm not sure how practical it is. You can think about it, but and expensive. I don't think it's used much. But if something else comes along that could heat the soil better than plastic, it's something to think about. I think cultural management is probably one of the things that's most easy to grasp for farmers, at least smallholders. And that's obviously the agronomical practices. So good agricultural practices usually actually is good for nematode management, but it's difficult to employ, especially if we talk about crop rotation, maybe because of limited land. But crop rotation is one of the main good agricultural practices. Never mind root knot nematodes. They're a bit more tricky to control with crop rotation, but there are resistant varieties, and cabbage is quite a good crop, I think, for root knot, right, as a rotation crop. So you could have a susceptible, for example, this is potato. Let's say you got PCN, you'd have potato, but then you'd put maize, which is not a crop, and cabbage, which is not a host, to get your pest population down. We did some. Okay, yeah, these are the considerations. So for crop rotation, really, again, you have to know your nematode species, what hosts they have, and which hosts are non-hosts. So it is practical, but it does require a bit of knowledge, and that's where we also want to interact, and that's where we are also working, actually. And I just put this graph. I'll explain. Does it go by itself? No. No, this is just a trial. I don't know if it's clear for you guys, but these are 3 seasons, okay? Where in a field we grew potatoes for 3 seasons, these 3 varieties, and then we grew something called nightshade. Manago, Solanum, these are 2 nightshade varieties, Amaranthus, and a fallow treatment, just in one field. This field was heavily infested with potato cyst nematode. So you can see, okay, ignore Shangi. We had some issues in the 2nd season here, but look at these 2 varieties. If you keep growing potatoes, this is what happens to your nematode population. It goes, well, the threshold is here, first of all, for the PCN in the field. But if you keep growing potatoes, your pest is really happy. I mean, but then we grew, you see with the nightshade, actually the population went down. So this, we are looking at working on this as a rotation crop, where you can suppress your potato cyst nematode population and then come back with potato, let's say after 3 seasons or maybe a bit more. We are working on that. But we don't know how adoptable it is. We know a nightshade is quite a nice leafy vegetable crop, but it doesn't grow well everywhere and so on. So there might be other things to think of, but we find this work quite exciting. never mind. No, I just thought of the banana paper, but we'll talk about it, right? I forgot. Anyway, so that's about trap crops. To be honest, we haven't worked much with tagetes, but it is a crop also that suppresses the nematode population. But it's the value of it. Like if you grow it, does it have any value for the, I don't think so. But I just mention it. And there might be other crops out there that we haven't yet tested. Yeah, so trap cropping and antagonistic plant is could be an income source. For example, managu if you're growing potato, or it could also be no economic gain, especially fallow. Do I mention fallow? Yeah. Okay, that's trap crops, but trap crops could be a good future for one of the options for nematode control. But we do need to know about the crops and the nematodes. Fallowing is also very easy. You leave it fallow, weed-free, but what are you going to get from that land? So I don't think it's an option a smallholder farmer would use, I don't think. It's better to have a crop there. Okay, resistance is probably the most important option for management of nematodes, but there is, as Danny mentioned, there are challenges that there are not that many available out there for use by farmers. But tomatoes, and there are some potato-resistant varieties for PCN, but in my experience, okay, off the top, I can't remember all of them now, they're not adoptable by the farmers. They like to grow Changi for the moment, unless it's changing. But Changi is really the popular, but it might be changing slowly. And then Danny, well, we have a project looking at another variety that's resistant, that has Changi properties. So we're also working on, because resistance is really a very important tool in the nematode control box. I think you all know this, about what's resistant, susceptible, and tolerant, but basically a resistant plant doesn't allow the nematode to reproduce much, so it stays healthy. A susceptible, well, it's supposed to look unhealthy there, has a lot of nematode, lets the nematodes, it's susceptible to the nematodes. Tolerant could be useful if it tolerates nematode attack, because it'll still provide yield, but then you will build up your nematode population, so you have to be careful. So it's very useful, and I would say it's probably one of the most important strategies as well to go for. But it's time-consuming. I think it takes years to develop. And sometimes resistance can be broken, or we have, for example, this selection of a virulent nematode population in the UK. You know, there are 2 species of potato cyst nematode. You know that, right? Potato cyst nematode, the Globodera rossochiensis and Globodera pallida. So there was, before they knew about pallida, they developed a resistant variety for rossochiensis, and they planted that, and it worked really well. And then all of a sudden, they were getting yield losses, and then discovered there's another nematode, Rossochiensis pallida, which now did not confer resistance to that nematode. So you got buildup of Globodera pallida. You get me? So you can. That could also happen here in Kenya, but if you just keep using resistant varieties against Globodera rossochiensis, there are not a lot of resistant varieties against Globodera pallida. It's a more complex situation. Biocontrol, we'll just touch in on that. It's quite interesting, and there are a few products on the market that are in use. I think with biocontrol we are also doing some research, and it's mainly with fungi. So beneficial fungi, they can attack the nematode in the soil and basically directly kill them. And this is the one we work mostly with. It will kill the eggs, and I think that, yeah, there's a product there. I think also Real IPN might have a product. But anyway, we're doing, we don't know the extent of use in Kenya and how effective it is. I think we need to do some more research to find out how effective it is. But in our pot trials, it is effective in some cases. It's still work to do here, I think. And here's another one. This is not a product that we have in. Oh, you said there might be one a product in Cuba, no? For this Pochonia, yeah. and it also attacks the eggs. And then this one is a bacteria, actually. We should start looking for this one in Kenya. I don't think we really looked. It could be very visible. But these spores here hatch and actually devour the live on the nematode. So it's also like a direct kill of the nematode, but there's no product. I think Syngenta has tried to make a product, but I'm not sure of the if it's actually on the market. Okay, in the US, yeah. Right. It's a difficult one. So it's difficult. Biocontrol of them is a bit difficult. So that's why the IPM. So it could be part of an IPM package, but we still need to do more research. Oh, and I haven't mentioned endophytes, but maybe, James, when you take them around, you talk a little about your endophyte work, which is also fungi that for example, trichoderma, you could, it doesn't directly affect the nematode. It enhances the immunity of the plant, and there's a competition, so it kind of prevents the plant from becoming infected. Chemical, I think you know all about this, so I don't know. But there are not bionematicides. Sorry, you don't know all about this. You know about the next slide. For bionematicides, also we haven't worked much, but there are some products on the market, and I think the one that contains neem is probably the one that is most effective. The others I don't know. And this is the ones you know about that I think are a very important component of the IPM, especially bringing down the population. I think that's where Velum could come in, unless if you have a high population of nematodes, you can bring a chemical in to bring the population down, and then you do the other options, I think. So I think it's ending there. So as I started off with sampling and identification, first of all you have to know if you have a nematode problem and what you have. And then you have to understand, well, we have to understand the biology, those of us who are working with it, and relate, and then, what's the word, communicate to you. You have to use different management methods, and I think most important, ask us. So I think I'm hoping for, like today, our launch today, that you are very free. You have to interact with us, or we have to interact together. I think that's an important part of our day today as well, because like this was just an overview, but we'll move on from here. So I think that ends my talk on management. Thank you very much.
I think we need a few minutes from Kanan. 5 minutes.
Okay, Mike makes me really nervous. So, can you hear my voice? Okay, just
microphone for the virtual people.
Okay. All right. So in the previous slides, we learned all about plant parasitic nematodes, but the world of nematode is not just limited to plant parasitic nematodes. There are many other different kinds. So this is very quick overview of non-plant parasitic nematodes. Okay, so as the title said, and Solveig also said, nematodes are everywhere. Okay, so of course, from agricultural land like this picture, you can find nematodes, plant parasitic nematodes, or other kinds of nematodes. But also, they can survive in somewhere extreme conditions, like desert, or somewhere very cold, like Antarctic, or somewhere unique, like hot spring or deep ocean. And also, they are not just in plants. They can be a parasites of almost anything. Okay, so here's a picture of insect parasites or animal parasites. I'm sorry for these pictures, and also fish parasites. Okay, so we learned that the nematodes are in soil and roots, and they can cause significant economic damage. But actually, if you take soil, handful of soil, actually they contains up to 50,000 nematodes. Okay, 50,000 nematodes is a lot of nematodes. And this can contains many different kinds of free-living nematodes. So they can be a bacterial feeder or fungal feeder, or some can be a predator, okay, predator of other nematodes. So because of this whole range of nematodes we have in soil, they can be very informative, okay? So what I mean by informative is by learning what kind of nematodes we have in soil, we can learn the food web of soil, so the soil health conditions, okay? So as I said earlier, some nematodes eat fungi. So fungi are eaten by certain nematodes, and some nematodes eat bacteria, okay? And then some nematodes eat other nematodes, and all these nematodes are food source of arthropods. And of course, arthropods are eaten by larger animals like bird, okay? So this is very simplified version of food web we have. But you can see that the nematodes plays very important role in nutrient and carbon cycles in our life. So I love free-living nematodes. Okay. What fascinates me most about free-living nematode is this various mouthparts. So some nematodes have this buccal cavity or have teeth to eat nematodes. They are my favorite nematodes. And some nematodes have stylet, but looks different from plant parasitic nematodes. And these mouthparts can tell us what they are eating, okay? So that's why they are very good, relatively easy, relatively cheap to study about food web, okay? You probably know about this nematode. So this is the most famous nematode in the world, and probably one of the most important nematode, called Cynorhabditis elegans. So this is the first animal to have its whole genome sequenced, and it is the only organism to have its connectome completed. So the connectome is the connections of neurons in our brain, okay? So Cynorhabditis elegans, C. elegans for short, is used to study about genes in other animals or the connectome, the connections of neurons in our brain. And here is the good ones, okay? So this is a little grotesque pictures, but so these nematodes are actually coming out from the dead insects, okay? So these nematodes kill insects, okay? So entomopathogenic nematodes, the parasites of insects, has a huge potential to use as a control management against insects, okay? So this is the healthy larva, and this is, but once the nematode infect this larva, then they turn to like abnormal color and they die, okay? So that was very quick overview of non-plant parasitic nematodes, but I hope you get the idea of not just the plant parasitic nematodes, but there are many different kinds of nematodes, and some of them are very important in our life. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. What stood out for me was the foliar nematodes. The question John was asking, what if these nematodes are there? We talk about nematodes in the soil, but what about nematodes in the leaves, maybe in the pods? That one really stood out for me. You know, sometimes we meet growers and we say it's a disease or it's insect or it's virus. And I just want to pass a mic around before we take a coffee break. It would be interesting to hear from us, especially the, buyer colleagues, what really stood out for us, even before we go to the practical session. So maybe I request a mic to be passed on. Starting from Anthony Mushina, would like to know what really stood out for you. I'm sure the presenters may want to know what stood out for the participants as they were presenting.
Good morning. I'll start with a question to Solve. Many growers right now, they are embracing the use of the Mexican marigold, the Tagetes manuta. I don't know how it controls, or to what extent does it control, or does it act as a host? Because most large growers are using that method. Thank you.
No, yeah. Okay. First, can I ask, so how are they using it, sorry?
Okay, they are just planting as a normal crop, and then after a certain period, they do the prowling.
Okay.
Yep.
So our experience with Janet's work, Donnie, I'm looking at you, was using it as an amendment, where we had some work that, as an amendment, it seemed to suppress the nematode population. There was some work was done in Chuka through an MSc student, but the actual, unless somebody else, I personally, I think, okay, we're not, as I said, we haven't worked with it much. Marigold, Mexican marigold, as a, whether, as planting it and then looking at the nematode population, unless Danny has something. But if I remember before, there are not all marigolds that are efficient. But it might be. So unless Danny, have you done something? Because not as an amendment, yes, but as the actual crop rotation crop, I don't know.
You disinfested now. We're talking about the Mexican marigold here, are we? Tagetes. Yes. Tagetes is Mexican marigold is something else.
Oh.
But Tagetes is marigold. And then you've got this big green bush that you see at the side of the road with these big lovely yellow flowers. That's Mexican marigold. Tagetes is root knot nematodes will enter the roots, and it's a bit of a trap crop basically. So it attracts them, but they're unable to multiply and multiply basically. They can't feed and they can't multiply, so it acts as a trap crop. And in certain areas of the world, they will actually use marigold in between vegetable plots, and it works quite well. Malawi, Zimbabwe in particular, use marigold as a rotation crop for tobacco, and it works very well. The problem is that there's a limited market for any rotation crop that doesn't have a product. So farmers are unwilling to use a rotation crop if they can't use it as or sell it or eat it, basically. And so that's where marigold tends to fall down. In where you've got a reasonable production system and you can create a market for it, the xanthophyll from marigold is used as a colouring agent and as an additive to chicken poultry farms for increasing the colour of our eggs, making them more yellow. So there is a limited market, but it needs to be coordinated and created, really.
Sure, thank you.
The Mexican marigold is a bit different.
Thank
the
you.
other one is called Tithonia, is it?
Tithonia.
It's Tithonia, sorry, yeah.
And Tithonia, any plant that's got any plant that or any mulch, basically. My sort of a recommendation with mulching, especially with crops like bananas, any mulch is good mulch, basically. It doesn't matter if it's a little bit, if it's more, it's better, but any mulch is good because the crops benefit from mulching. But they also, as Kanan has pointed out, if you've got a good mulching, if you've got a good environment for non-parasitic nematodes, they then prey on the parasitic nematodes and you build up and you ameliorate a nice environment for natural cycles within the soil. So mulching is good, basically.
Can I ask?
Thank you.
Can I just ask you again, because I'm curious about the Tithonia. So they grow it then as a mulch for later? Why do they grow it? Or they grow it because they think it will reduce the nematodes?
They just grow the crop normally as a normal crop, And then after 1 month or 2 months, they do the flowering.
Okay.
Actually, immediately after flowering. Yep.
Okay.
As well,
And they implant. Okay, so it will
it
work.
acts also as a green manure for them.
Okay, well then it's beneficial.
It's very high in potassium.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's beneficial that way.
Thank you. The whole topic stood out as interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anthony.
What really stood out for me was the PCN, or potato cyst nematodes. I'm actually working in a region that is heavily affected by the same. And probably my question now would be, because I've done trials and I've seen how it's working, actually we cannot even believe it. A difference of 60 bucks in an acre where there is control and uncontrol. So what happens now to the other useful nematodes when you use a Velum, a product like Velum? Thank you.
Thank you, Elias. What happens to the free-living nematodes once you apply a nematicide? We'll come to that discussion in the afternoon, but most nematicides are very toxic. So we see that most of them will have an impact, a negative impact on free-living nematodes. We'll come into a discussion specifically looking at Velum and what it does to all other nematodes in the afternoon's presentation. But very good question.
Okay, what actually stood out for me is a photo that Danny showed of a forest being cleared to pave way for potato farming, because it's actually what is happening in my area, Elgeyo Marakwet. Farmers keep on moving, encroaching the forest to ensure that they get clean farms to increase their production. But of course, it is not a sustainable way of farming because of increasing population and, of course, for environmental effect. So I believe with Velum, everything will be okay, because at least they can be able to keep their production high without affecting our forests. Thank you.
Morning once more. Two questions here. One, how do we differentiate between foliar nematodes and other fungal diseases? Number two, do they affect roots or ponds, as in beans or other crops?
Well, we can go into taxonomy, but we don't want to go there today. Basically, one of the things that you will learn from the physical activities here is that if you think you have a problem with nematodes, you extract the nematodes and then you look at them, and then you're able to see whether nematodes are there in large densities or whether there's hardly any, in which case it will give an indication whether the nematodes are part of the problem or the whole problem. But it's and the book that Solveig showed, in that it goes through the basic strategies basically for extracting nematodes, able to see whether the nematodes are part of the problem or not, basically. And every single crop that we grow is affected by plant parasitic nematodes. There isn't a single crop that any of us here can name that doesn't have a nematode problem. They don't have a nematode problem all the time, but particularly in the tropics, one of the differences between temperate climates and tropical climates is in temperate climates there tends to be a single nematode problem per crop, or biggest problem. Whereas in the tropics we've got a whole range. And if you go out to any potato, banana, bean, soybean field, you'll find a whole variety of different parasitic nematodes. Most of them are probably at a level that are not causing damage. They're nibbling away at some of the roots. But root knot nematode in particular, you'll probably find at quite high densities, causing a problem, together with the other ones in unison, really. And one of the difficulties there is to establish which ones are causing a problem, and if they are at all, does it warrant, back to what Solveig was saying, is get your field tested Do you have nematodes? Don't you? If you have nematodes, which ones do you have, and at what kind of density levels? Is it cost effective to treat, or are you below the threshold level? And that's where, you know, the likes of crop nuts, and you can work in combination in unison with them. But that said, you should be working with Nem Africa now instead of crop nuts.
No, I can just add on the foliar. I don't know whose question, how you could differentiate between. Yeah, so I don't know. I've just experienced with strawberry. So they will be feeding in the what's it called, the crowns of it. So you might get distorted or leaves that have not developed. I don't know. Can none of you, like the strawberry in the middle will be not developed. I don't know about chrysanthemums. I know there's a chrysanthemum nematode, but I don't have experience. So the leaves will be distorted. You won't get maybe that unless there's an interaction with fungi. Yeah, so you'd have to sample and keep that sample moist.
So you extract from the leaves?
From the leaves, yes. And the crown even. Yeah, the crown of the... At least with strawberries. Chrysanthemum I have less experience. But it's a very good point, because when we had that a year or two ago, there was, what are they called? Tulip... No. Anyway, there was some chrysanthemum farmers who suspected nematode damage, but they never came back to us. They were supposed to come up with some, yeah. So it's a valid point that foliar nematodes, it's a gap actually that we are not looking at.
Especially for flowers.
Okay, it was just a comment. Mine, I'm very happy man. I'm now able to identify some nematodes. I never knew there were so many kinds of nematodes in the soil, others in the sea. So I'm just an happy man. Thank you.
Yes, good morning. Mine, what really stood out for me is the formation of the galls, yeah, from Danny's presentation, which I want you also to confirm. The galls, do they form from as a response of the damage by the nematodes, or the nematode that swells to form the galls? Yes.
Thank you. The galls are a reaction by the plant to the infection of the nematodes. So the nematodes don't really cause the galling. It's actually the root, it's the plant itself that reacts to that infection. And the root sort of creates these, it's like a defense mechanism basically, which the nematode has sort of exploited. And different varieties will what I tried to show in the presentation was that there's a whole range of different styles and types of galling, and different crops tend to have different styles of galls, but also different varieties within the crop. I showed the one of maize, for example. That particular variety does not cause galls at all, but other maize varieties, you get swellings on the roots. So it is very variable, but it's a reaction by the plant to the nematode. Yeah. No further.
Okay, thank you.
But we get, I use this as a basic presentation for people when we're doing this kind of thing. And we were given a presentation in Ethiopia. It was in Hawassa, actually, when we went to see the tomato farm. And at the end of the presentation, the chap, he stood up and he said, he was a director of the station, he said, that's all very well, but what about pictures from the field, okay, as opposed to your experimental photos? And I said to him, every single one of those photos has come from a farmer's field. Only one or two are actually experimental. All those photos are from the field, from farmers' fields, almost exclusively. And he didn't believe me. And then we went to the farm, the Hawassa farm, where I showed you the tomatoes. And those tomatoes had major serious galling on the roots, right? So after the next day, it was like a 2 or 3 day meeting. The next day in the morning, we did a roundup. We said, okay, what did everybody learn from yesterday? He stood up, straight away, he said, now I believe you. He said, we went to that farm yesterday. He said, I could not believe it. That farm, they destroyed that greenhouse completely. And it was producing because of nematodes. Oh, and yeah, it was interesting. Okay. You were there, weren't you? Yeah.
Thank you so much. You have another comment?
No, I'm good.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I think from the interaction this morning, two things are clear. We have an invisible enemy. Initially, we thought this enemy is below the ground. Now we know that he's also on top. So foliar nematodes, below the ground nematodes, affecting a wide number of crops, if it is fruits, if it is cereal, if it is vegetables, and we just have to keep learning about the topic. So for now, we are going to pause here. Maybe when we come back, if we get some time, we could also get the feedback from this other session, so that we do a short coffee break. Danny, yes?
Yeah, carry on. I just want to say something before we break, actually.
Yeah. Milka, how many minutes should we have for coffee? 15? 20? Great. 20 minutes for coffee. We are going to be here on time because we have another session that is actually interesting and very interesting. And I'm so glad that my colleagues are, learning and taking these lessons very seriously, because I believe the challenges are massive. Kenya, every crop, the production is declining. If you go to coffee, if you go to maize, if you go to potato, if you go to vegetables, the farmer will tell you what they produced 5 years ago is different from what they are producing now. And if you ask them the reason, some of them do not know. But now we have a big topic to think about, the impact of nematodes on yields and income. So Danny, you can...
Yeah, thanks, Diana. I'm the last person who wants to delay coffee, I can tell you now. As these guys know. But just a couple of quick things, actually. One is this manual, okay? Now, you might not want this exactly because it's got DuPont slapped on the front of it. And DuPont, basically, they paid to have it reprinted with their name on it. Syngenta paid to have it printed with their name on it. And Real IPM, together with others, we paid to have it printed with a name. We produced this, actually a long time ago now, and I had to be persuaded to produce this because I didn't think it would be used, it would be too technical for people. Since we produced it, we've had nothing but glowing comments about how good it is, how useful it is, partly because it's so practical, and a lot of the photos that you saw this morning are in here. Now, I mentioned in an email, I think it was to Dirk actually, if Bayer want to produce this, to be honest, it's peanuts really. We're talking like $3,000 or $4,000 to have it reprinted with Bayer on it. And all I'm saying is, we don't benefit from it, except we get the pleasure of knowing that it's being used and it's out there and people are getting to know nematodes better and understand them better. So we're pleased and proud about that. But it's a simple thing to do. It's there, it's ready. And if you're out with producers and when you're distributing Velum, it's a nice addition that you might want to consider and which we can sort out. So, as I say, I don't get anything out of it, but except pleasure. But think about it, because it would be a good thing. And we can talk to Dirk as well. I don't know how the system works here, or whether you've got to go to South Africa. Now, the other thing, and together with Diana, who I'm pleased to say has initiated discussions, I said earlier, we're in discussions with, is it Albert Schering?
Yes.
Yeah, I think he's quite high up there in the research at Bayer. So we're in discussions with him about this piece of paper. This is made from banana, okay? So it didn't come from Kisi, I'm afraid. It actually came from Costa Rica. But we have a project with North Carolina State University with Gates funding. And the idea was, initially the idea was to find a vehicle, a carrier for ivermectin, which is Tervigo. It's a very good nematicide, but it does not move in the soil, and getting it to the target zone is difficult. So they were tasked with looking at finding an organic matrix that could deliver it to the root zone. Basically, and long story short, they came up with banana fiber because it's got particular properties that enable the ivermectin to be applied to the paper in the minutest densities and for it to stay the longest in the soil. So banana paper was chosen from about 20 or 30 different organic products, normal paper, sugarcane paper, cannabis paper, etc. Banana paper worked the best. We've been conducting studies with it since then for the past 3 or 4 years in East Africa and West Africa. And on potato, it works really well, okay? We've tried fluparum, and actually, you may be happy to know that fluparum works better than ivermectin, actually. So we've actually switched to fluparum because it works the best, and we're using it as a standard with this. And so we're in discussions with research to see how we can work with Bayer to use it with fluparum for delivery to farmers. And the idea is we're still in prototype and proof of concept, really. On potatoes, it works well, but the idea is, this is a big example. Basically, a pouch, basically, that you can put your potato into. We've got the small ones as well. And then it's much easier for the farmer. So I'd like to mention it because we are in discussions with Bayer, in the research in Germany and the States, together with Diana. And it would be good to actually have a motivational team that goes out there and delivers it to farmers and gets information and promotes it. We're not there yet, but we're still at the research stage. But I mention it because you guys are out in the field, and we may be coming to you to say, remember that banana paper? We want you to push it, and let's get some good data to see how it works. With the farmers that we've worked with, they love it. They don't hate, I take that back. They do not like the fact that it's a piece of paper. So the fact that it being a pouch that they can go choo, 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 and through the field is much more attractive to the farmers, obviously. And so the next batch we get, hopefully, will be in pouches. But we're using it on yam, basically vegetatively propagated material. We're now starting with sweet potato. There's some good results from the States, from the greenhouse. So we're looking at sweet potato. We've got good results on yam. We'd like to start with sugarcane because sugarcane gets hammered by nematodes, really hammered. And what else? And cassava. We're getting good results with cassava, but particularly good results with potato. So I think we've got a great market here for potato, basically. But the beauty of this is, well, there's a number of beauties. One is the dosage on this paper. From a sales point of view, John, close your ears. From a sales point of view, it's rubbish. Because we're talking about Charlie said about 1,000th the dosage on that paper than what you would treat. So from a corporate responsibility perspective, it's great because you're really reducing the amount down to a limited minimal contamination. But it's still effective, and it's delivered to the root zone because it's exactly where you want it, and it's effective, but at a minuscule rate. And the other beauty of this is, this was initiated in order to look for nematode management, basically using ivermectin because it doesn't move. We now think that the potential for a package, treat it with fluparum, treat it with an insecticide, treat it with a fungicide, put some organic biocontrol agent on there. You can treat it with a bit of fertilizer, slow release fertilizer. We think the options, the limitations are zero, and the options are massive. So we're really hoping, we're still waiting to hear back from Albert, but he said they're ticking along on it. One of the problems, of course, will be if that's treated with a pesticide, the handling issue. So, and that will be a big hurdle to get around, actually. Latex gloves, perhaps, I don't know, but as an experimental potential, we think that's got huge, massive potential. And you can packets of pouches sold in Agrovet, basically, with a pair of gloves, perhaps, and then the farmers are made aware of them and they use it for the potatoes or sweet potato or whatever. So I'd just like to mention that so you're aware, because I'm starting to really need coffee now.
Thank you. Thank you, Danny. Yes, Milka? Yes. So we break for coffee back at 11:40, please. I think coffee is served same place we were in the morning. Yes, so please enjoy your coffee.